In the history of video games, there have been so many incredible sequels made that people just absolutely adore, myself included. Things like Super Mario Bros. 3, Castlevania 3, Mega Man 3. There's a lot of 3s out there that people really like. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. Thank you for stopping by if you're new here. Thank you for coming back if you're a return viewer. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Today, we're not talking about any of those popular sequels, though. We are talking about some sequels that you may have forgotten about, and we are starting on the PlayStation 1. My love of rhythm games really started with Parappa the Rapper, and while I still adore that title, its lesser known but incredibly charming spin-off/sequel, Jammer Lammy, is my favorite. Featuring the same flat Stanley-styled graphics as Parappa, Lammy switches things up by leaning into various styles of rock and roll for each level. Everything from traditional rock music to funk to quasi-thrash metal. And the game piles on the gameplay options. You can freestyle in between notes to gain extra points. You're able to add different audio effects to your guitar, like a wah-wah pedal or a distortion pedal, and eventually you're able to unlock co-op or versus mode as well. Every song in the game is memorable, the character designs are fantastic and frequently hilarious, and the gameplay is solid and enjoyable. It's one of the main PS1 games I go back to. While the original Blaster Master on the NES is one part run-and-gun platformer and one part isometric shooter, Blaster Master Boy on the Game Boy takes the running and gunning out of the mix and instead puts you into a Bomberman-esque world of top-down level exploration and boss fighting. And it's Bomberman-esque because this game started out in Japan as a Bomberman game. Originally a sequel to Robo Warrior, this game was called Bomber King Scenario 2, making it actually a super double-secret forgotten sequel. It lands on both the Blaster Master and Bomberman lists. The levels you play through are large, allowing your character the ability to both shoot and blast rocks and enemies. Each level will require you to find a key, which takes you into a massive boss fight. And as you play through, you'll collect different power-ups that impact both your weapons and your armor, letting you take more damage or clear more terrain. It's a fun spin on the originals in the series that got melded to make this title, and while it's not the proper sequel I thought we'd be getting to Blaster Master, that wouldn't happen until years later, it's a fun diversion and a nice way to return to the series that I love. The original Knights was a mind-blowing experience on the Sega Saturn and was something that I played frequently at friends' houses or on demo kiosks. And honestly, I wasn't aware there was a Wii release until a couple of years ago. And while a bit of that original magic has worn off, the sequel, Knight's Journey of Dreams, is a worthy successor that carries the legacy of the Sonic Team classic. Featuring trippy environments with fun 3D flying mechanics like the original, the game will send you through multiple levels for each child Knights interacts with, as well as allowing you to unlock things like multiplayer, a soundtrack, a sketchbook, and other things as well. One of the things I really appreciate about this game is that it doesn't force you into using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. You can also play it using just the remote, a classic controller, or a GameCube controller. It's a really fun title that's a worthy successor to the original, and something that I really think shows off some of the things that the Wii was really good at, being creative with controls. The theme of the day with regards to arcade sequels is mind-numbingly difficult, and that is 100% true with the sequel to the classic Burger Time, Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory. Putting you in the role of Peter Pepper, Ice Cream Factory amps up the already difficult Burger Time by making you roll or kick ice cream scoops onto enemies, which does seem awfully unsanitary to me. Gone are the pepper shakers, gone are the burger ingredients. Instead, your goal is to move ice cream scoops around the level, into enemies, and ultimately onto the empty cones throughout the level to proceed. You're able to jump in this game as well, which is a departure from the original, which makes avoiding enemies a bit easier, but the difficulty in this game is at the absolute peak level. It's fun, but it can be an incredibly frustrating experience if you're not on your game. While a fairly unknown game overall in the grand pantheon of Suikoden releases, Suikoden Tactics is a massive departure from a series that had previously relied entirely on traditional JRPG turn-based mechanics. And it's a welcome change that does a very good job of bridging the gap of the time before and after Suikoden 4, which released the prior year. And it features characters that were present in that game. And while you won't be recruiting all 108 Stars of Destiny, as was tradition in previous iterations, you will still be recruiting a vast cast of characters to your cause. The game features a compelling storyline with excellent combat mechanics, amazing music, and some less than stellar voice acting and some muddy visuals, but it's a forgivable sin when the overall package is as good as this one is. If you're a fan of the Suikoden universe, or at least enjoy tactical strategy games, this is an excellent PS2 entry to check out.
是啊，我听说是在搜捕刺客组织，听说他们回来了。
When I think of Assassin's Creed, which is one of my all-time favorite video game series, I think of sprawling 3D cityscapes or open worlds to explore, and decidedly not about 2.5D side-scrolling platformers. But the Assassin's Creed Chronicles series of games did just that, and made something that is kind of remarkable in its execution. The series spans 3 games, China, India, and Russia, and calls back characters featured in different media efforts from the Assassin's Creed universe. China puts you in the 16th century China during the Ming Dynasty, and you play as Xiao Jun, who was first featured in the short film Assassin's Creed Embers, and whose descendant Lin appeared in the 2016 Assassin's Creed film. India takes place during the 19th century India during the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and sees you take control of Arbaz Mir from the graphic novel Assassin's Creed Brahman, and who is also the father of Henry Green from Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And finally, Russia puts you in Russia, shockingly, in 1917 during the October Revolution, playing as Nikolai Orlyov from the graphic novels Assassin's Creed The Fall and its sequel, The Chain. They all play similarly, with each protagonist having their own unique attacks and abilities. And being an Assassin's Creed game, everything is connected. While they're not as deep as any of the mainline series, I still think they're a fun lore-building additive to the AC universe. Space Channel 5 was and is one of my all-time favorite games. It easily ranks in the top 3 for me on the Dreamcast, and I was ecstatic when the sequel was announced. And Space Channel 5 Part 2 takes what the original did and does the smart thing. It pluses the original experience. There were new alternative costumes to unlock, brand new game modes, and fully instrumental battles, all while maintaining the simple fun of the original directional, shoot, and rescue mechanics. Notable as the last game developed by United Game Artists before Sega restructured in 2003, was also the last work for the company by Tetsuya Mizuguchi, who would go on to lead efforts behind notable games like Lumines, Meteos, and Tetris Effect. At the end of the day, Space Channel 5 Part 2 is a fun rhythm game that leans heavily into its roots, but it feels fresh due to important updates and fun additions to the title. The original Mr. Do was a maze game that saw you digging tunnels and collecting cherries, all while avoiding dinosaurs. So the brilliant sequel, Mr. Do's Castle, logically is a platformer that sees Mr. Do climbing up and down stairs and ladders, flipping stairs around, clubbing monsters over the head, dropping them into pits, and crushing them with blocks. It's a lot, and it's so much fun. Now, this is an early 80s arcade game, so it's ball-bustingly difficult and 100% designed to eat through your quarters, but the challenge is 90% of the enjoyment. You'll be hard-pressed to skate through any level, but you'll want to keep coming back to try and make your way further into the game, which is the mark of any excellent arcade title. With fun graphics, good sound, and creative level designs, Mr. Do's Castle is a fun throwback that's still worth playing some 40 years after its initial release. The oft-forgotten and typically ignored entry in the Arkham series definitely deserves a lot of the criticism it received for the technical issues folks encountered when the game launched. But I'm gonna be honest with you, outside of those problems, Arkham Origins delivers a compelling story about Batman's early experiences in Gotham, with the same familiar and accessible combat system we'd experienced with both Asylum and City. I personally found the game to be incredibly compelling, giving us insight into both Batman and the Joker before they were the characters we became familiar with in the original 2 games. It's a title that should be lauded for its expansive lore building and desire to bring a different approach to what we were used to with the previous Arkham games. And maybe I'm a bit rose-colored on this one, but it made sense to me that this was a more heavily combat-focused game than a stealth title, given that it was Batman's early years of crime fighting. I loved how big the city was, how important the fights felt, and especially the multi-phased boss fights. It's a game that has rightfully received its lumps, but I really think it's a shame that WB Games all but ignores its existence when we talk about the Arkham series as a whole. There are certain mythical games out there that a lot of times I believe are just really convincing mass hallucinations that people have had. Golden Axe Warrior was just such a game. I'd heard about it, and I'd had people tell me about it, but I'd never actually seen it for myself until last year. And while seeing it was cool, getting to actually play it was a thrill. Here's a Zelda that's arguably better than the original Zelda, with tighter controls, better graphics, and strong combat. Like, the only thing that Golden Axe Warrior falls behind on is the soundtrack, and even that is pretty damn good. There's over 200 screens on the overworld map, with 9 dungeons to go through with boss fights in each one. You get to fight Death Adder in a secret 10th dungeon after beating the other 9. I mean, yes, it is a Zelda clone, and it leans heavily into those tropes. But if you're going to copy something, you might as well copy the best, right? And why not, while you're at it, improve on the areas that were lacking in the original? Alright, my friends, there you have it. 10 fantastic sequels that you may have forgotten about that kind of slid under the radar, or maybe are just kind of the black sheep of the series. Let me know in the comments down below if there are any secret sequels out there that you love. I would love to check them out for a future iteration on this video. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you stopping by. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.